The Big Book of Baseball Louie by Robert Simmons. Baseball Louie, Part 1, The Beginning, Sports Prison. Chapter 1, Sentencing. 1 million years in federal sports prison. Yup, that's me, sitting in the courthouse. I'm being accused and being horribly sentenced. The judges think I committed baseball fraud, and so I can't be on the field anymore, and she wants me to go to jail for 8,100,000 years. I can't go to prison for that long. When I get out, there will surely be no longer be baseball. I can't live without baseball. Baseball! I cried out. I longed for it. I yearned for the fields and the bases and the balls. Neat baseball! Ah! The court ignored my pleas. They sentenced me to 1,000,000,000,000 years in prison. No baseball. The jury just didn't understand. I needed baseball to live. I breathe it. I love it. It hurts to be apart from it. Next thing I knew, I was getting off the prison bus and going to my new home. I didn't want to be in prison, but it seemed to be my fate. I just couldn't bear to even think about baseball right now. It just hurt too much. I went to my prison cell and laid down in my baseball prison bed and just cried. I lay on my side and imagined what life would be like if I was a baseball. Much better than this place, surely. Hey, buddy, what are you in for? I looked up at the person who had just sat down next to me. It was a tall, short white man with orange hair and a goatee. He had easer blue eyes and a long, beautiful hair. I wiped my nose and sniffled, sitting up to take a better gander at the beautiful man. They think that I pretended to get a home run when it was really my natural talent. I swear I'm that good at baseball, and I would never commit base fraud. He shook his head. You definitely didn't do that. You're too pretty. He patted my shoulder. I grinned at him. Thanks. What are you in here for? He scratched his neck and looked around the room. Hit some guy in the face with bowling balls so hard that he lost all his teeth at once and had to get dentures. Ugly ones. Makes sense. He deserved it. I nodded at his decision, even though I hadn't known the guy. Sports jail is pretty bad so far, hey? He nodded. You get used to it. I've been here for almost 2 whole months, and I'm almost not even crying anymore. He reached out to shake my hand. I'm Dan the bowling man, by the way. I shook his hand vigorously. Baseball Louie! Chapter 2. Lunch. Dan the bowling man and I went to lunch together a couple hours later. I used my charm and wit to get an extra piece of cheese to feed him. He smiled at me, and I smiled back. You didn't have to do that. I have my own meal, Dan the bowling man told me as we sat down on the prison lunch table. I know, I replied, but I think you're really neat, and I wish we could kiss. I wish you could eat this piece of cheese with me. I chuckled nervously and ran a hand through my bright purple hair. My hair was naturally purple and red, but nobody believed me. I was just special like that. Also, my eyeballs were pure white, and I didn't have irises or pupils. I couldn't see for shit. Part of why I sucked at baseball, was really good at baseball and shouldn't be in jail. Unfortunately, I ran out of teeth about 8 meals ago. Dan the bowling man placed a hand over his heart. You poor thing. I will make you oatmeal out of this piece of cheese, and you can eat it. Soon we will give you the teeth I stole from that guy with the ugly dentures. I have them back in my cell. You should come back to my cell after lunch with me, Baseball Louie. They let you keep those, Dan the bowling man? I asked. He winked. They do if they don't find out. They think that guy swallowed them. They've been searching his shit for days. I giggled. Okay, but I lied about having no teeth. I actually have far too many, since my original baby teeth never fell out, I told him. Dan the bowling man chuckled and patted my back. That's okay. I'll still give you the other teeth. Thanks, Dan the bowling man. You're a real one, I replied as I finished my piece of cheese in 3 bites flat. He took the other piece of cheese out of my hand and gently put it into his pocket, patting it. Late night snack for later, he winked at me. I nodded understandingly, and we went out to the yard. I lay face down on the ground in the mud and screamed at the top of my lungs. Dan the bowling man chuckled and laid down next to me. I turned to look at him, and we made eye contact. His eager blue eyes pierced into my soul. I am a worm in the mud, I told him. You sure are, buddy. He giggled and wiggled in the dirt next to me. I smiled at him and caught his eye. But we had to get up from the mud before we got in trouble with the guards, or even worse, the warden. We stood near the fence and drank some juice boxes, just chatting about the lives we left behind. Chapter 3. Letters. We had to go inside for stamp-making class because we needed stamps to write home to our family members, and we had to make them ourselves. I was planning to write to my dog, Kevin. He was a miniature Chihuahua Dalmatian mix and my best friend. While I was in sports prison, he was staying with my sister. She was nice to Kevin, but I still missed him and wanted to hang out with him whenever I possibly could. I wasn't allowed visitors for the first 800 years, though, and it broke my goddamn heart. I was going to write to him, and it would be amazing, although I couldn't remember whether or not I taught him to read. Dan the bowling man sat next to me in stamp-making class, and we had a blast. The senior sports prisoners taught us all about how to make a pretty cool-looking stamp and how to make it functional. It was pretty cool and extremely informative. When I was done with the class, I knew how to make a stamp that would be perfect to slap on my letter to Kevin. Dan the bowling man was also very good at stamp making, perhaps better than me, but that's besides the point. Once we finished with the class, I went back to my cell. Dan the bowling man followed me and sat next to me on my uncomfortable sports bed. He grinned at me. So, who are you writing to with your stamp? I chuckled nervously and tucked a strand of my bright, beautiful purple hair behind my ear. Nobody, just my dog, I giggled. His name is Kevin. Dan the bowling man held out his fist for a fist bump. That's a great name for a dog. We fist bumped. It was, you could say, pretty awesome. I pulled out a sheet of sports prison paper and a sports prison sanctioned orange crayon and began writing as Dan the bowling man breathed over my shoulder. Dear Kevin, I wrote. After that, I froze for about 40 seconds. Damn it, writer's block, I said, dropping my orange sports sanctioned crayon on the ground. It broke in two. Dan the bowling man patted my shoulder. That's okay. Start with a good line. Something like, I'm currently in sports prison, he suggested, picking up the 2 halves of my orange crayon with his bowling calloused fingers and handing them to me. Gingerly taking the crayon pieces from him, I nodded and began writing the suggested line. I got stuck on how to spell the word currently, though, and looked up at Dan the bowling man for help. He smiled warmly at me and took my hand, helping me shape the letters and spell it, as far as I knew, correctly. I couldn't see very well, so I really didn't know. I easily finished the rest of the sentence and then took off, writing 10 whole pages per minute until I finished the page. Writing 10 whole words per minute until I finished the page, signing my name with a flourish. We did it. I grinned up at Dan the bowling man. I just hope Kevin can read the letter. He ran his hands through his luscious orange locks. It's okay. He'll get the vibes, he said, and handed me a purple crayon to address the envelope I had with. After I wrote it and stuck a stamp on, we were done. I headed out of the cell to find a guard to hand the letter to. Dan the bowling man walked with me, since my eyesight and depth perception sucked so bad. Eventually, I felt around enough to put my hand on some guy and handed it to him. Hopefully that's the right guy, I said, shrugging, as it fell onto the floor, because all I had done was press it against his arm. We went back to my cell. Chapter 4. The Story. I laid back on the bed and put my hands behind my head, looking up at the ceiling, which had evil baseball decals plastered all over it. They were scary balls with angry eyes and pitchforks, like they were devils. And there were evil baseball bats, too, with the same evil eyebrows. But these ones just had cat eyes reading glasses on instead of pitchforks. I think the evil little guys were supposed to give me nightmares and scare me straight. but they just seemed sort of silly to me. I stared up at them, entranced, and made up a story about them and how they turned evil in the first place. In the story, there was a special baseball field made specifically for the sentient balls and bats, and they were doing really good at it. Every time they went to a field and played the game, their games were against normal humans baseball teams, they would win within the first 10 minutes. It was crazy. They made pretty darn quickly and got a lot of money, and the bigwigs at the movie producer company even started making a movie about them. Tragedy struck after first few months of this, though, when the big bad bald dude who led the team was found out to be a fake loser. He was no good at baseball, and it turned out every game was staged and then thrown. The scandal was so bad, and they were laughed off the stage at every game they went to from then on. Eventually, the balls and bats got to talking. They decided never to be nice to anyone ever again. They drew big, angry eyebrows on their face and scowled all the time. They volunteered to be on the ceiling of a horrible, horrible sports prison for the rest of time. That was in the 90s, and they were still here today in 2017. Dan the bowling man was still in the cell, sitting on the bed across from me, which I hadn't really noticed before. When I glanced away from being interrupted with the ceiling bats and balls, I met eyes with Dan the bowling man and realized that he'd been talking to me the whole time. "Do you have a roommate, Baseball Louie?" Dan the bowling man asked. "I've been asking for 8 whole minutes. What's going on?" I hesitated. I can't remember. "Baseball Louie, you're so silly," Dan the bowling man said, giggling and chuckling. "I could be your roommate, Baseball Louie." I shook my head sadly. "It's forbidden. We're in prison for different sports. Sharing a room would be blasphemous." I crossed my arms defeatedly. Dan the bowling man went quiet. Our eyes locked. I blushed, tucking some purple hair behind my ear. Dan the bowling man leaned towards me. I leaned towards him, blinking a lot. He moved over to the other bed with me, holding my waist. Our faces were inches apart. We were about to kiss. Chapter 5? Roommate, etc. Wham! The door opened. We both jumped up and looked. A scary tall guy had entered the room. "The name's Manfred." Wait, who was this guy? He was wearing the largest cowboy hat I had ever seen. He had long, flowing brown hair. He wore bright pink cowboy boots and looked very angry. "What's your name, partner?" Baseball Louie," I squeaked. "And this is Dan the bowling man." That aforementioned bowling man walked across the room to my bed and sat next to me, patting me on the back. He thought for a moment, then nodded in approval. "Nice to meet you. This is my goddamn cell." "You mean," I gulped, you mean you're my roommate?" Manfred nodded, punching his fist into his other hand. "And once I beat you up, I'll have the room to myself." I started quaking and trembling in fear. "Look, Manfred, we don't want any trouble." Dan the bowling man grabbed my arm. "Baseball Louie, you're not going to be able to talk any sense into him. We have to run." He pulled me to my feet, and we hurried out of the cell. "Where are we going?" I called over to him as we ran down the hallway out of the prison. "Anywhere but here," he replied as he dragged me along. I nodded. That made sense. We hurried along until we got to a room and rushed in. "Did we lose him?" I asked, panting. I didn't want to have to use my baseball prodigy skills for evil to beat Manfred up, but I would if I had to. Dan the bowling man peeked out of the room. "It's all clear," he said. I wiped my forehead. Phew, that was a close one. I went to open the door, but quickly realized that it was locked. "Aw, darn," I said, leaning against the wall and sliding down to the floor. "We're stuck." "It's not too terrible," Dan the bowling man said. "At least we have each other. You can eat me if you get hungry." "No thanks, I don't eat orange things," I replied sadly. He nodded solemnly. "I understand. Orange is a bad flavor." Chapter 6. Baseball Epiphany. I glanced up at the wall closest to the closet and had an epiphany. There, hanging on the wall, was a small bat the size of a baseball, and there was a cleaning rag Hanging on the wall was a small ball the size of a baseball, and and there was a cleaning rag that looked enough like a glove that I could probably do it. I looked across the room. There was a metal pipe that could work perfectly for a baseball bat. It was probably connected to the water right now. Oh. And it was probably connected to water right now. It could work. Dan the bowling man, I said, snapping my head over toward where he was so I could take a gander at him. He looked over at me, albeit a bit scared. I grinned. Want to play some baseball? Baseball, Louie. I don't know if you noticed, but we are right now in a closet in sports prison. We're not allowed to play sports during our sentence. We could even be killed. Dan the bowling man said to me. I frowned. I won't tell if you won't, buddy. I grinned at him. I was just itching to play some baseball and use my baseball prodigy skills, etc. Dan the bowling man grinned back at me. Okay, do you want to bat or pitch? I don't know what those words mean, I told him, and grabbed the pipe, using my super strength to rip it out of the wall. Only a bit of sewage, etc. got all over me, and only a tiny amount got in my mouth. I turned back at him, running a hand through my now sludgy hair. I'll hit the ball, and you should throw it for me like I'm a special dog named Kevin. He nodded and grabbed the ball. Are you ready, Baseball Louie? I nodded excitedly, and he threw the ball. I hit it with ease. I was a baseball prodigy, after all. He threw it again. This time he must have rigged it, because it fell on the floor in front of me. I frowned and tossed it back to him. Let's try it again. Dan the bowling man caught the ball and wound it up one more time before throwing it to me at a very fast speed. I almost hit it, but instead it went right through the door handle. The door flung wide open as the handle was the only thing holding it closed. Phew! That was a close one, I said, and I grinned, leaving quickly. Dan the bowling man followed right behind me, giving me a flat tire with each step. I know where we can go to be safe, Dan the bowling man told me. Follow me! We ran and eventually made it to the bowling wing of sports prison. Dan the bowling man was the only inmate there because nobody bowls anymore, and definitely not professionally. Dan the bowling man and I sat on his bed, and he told me in more detail the story of how he ended up in sports prison. Chapter 7. Dan the bowling man's story. Let me tell you about how it all started, said Dan the bowling man, patting the spot next to him on the bed. I gladly sat next to him and leaned in close so I could hear what he was saying. It all started when I was a wee bowling lad. My father was a winning bowler in the bowling leagues, and he wanted me to be following in his bowling shoe footsteps and become a big name. I was trying very hard to make him proud, but I'm just not so good at bowling. I had 2 left hands when it comes to bowling balls. By the time I was 11 years old, I was a disappointment. My father sent me to a 3-year bowling camp, and a couple of years ago, at the suggestion of his best bowling friend, apparently his son was able to get much better at bowling through the camp. At bowling camp, the counselors made it their personal mission to get me good at bowling. They tried everything to no avail. First, they tried changing out the floors. I bowled on grass, but I was allergic to it and broke out in hives. They had me bowl on carpet, but I would just lie face down on the ground all day. They tried straight up mud, too, but it didn't work. Then they changed the balls. I tried bowling with basketballs first, then soccer balls, and tennis balls. The problem was none of them were heavy enough to knock over any of the pins. Plus, when you try to poke your finger holes in a ball that's full of air, it pops. There were a lot of flat balls that summer. Eventually, they had me bowl as the ball, and I wasn't too shabby at that. I got better and better at bowling from then on. I even got a strike one time. At the end of the summer, we went to the bowling championship against the other big bowling camp. I was going to make my dad proud. He was in the stands, watching, waiting for me to live up to the legacy he'd set so many moons ago. When it was my turn to bowl, I couldn't have been more focused. I curled up into the ball and rolled down the lane. I was going so fast, on track to hit every single bowling pin. But disaster struck. I ran out of momentum right before I won. The ball that was my body ended up screeching to a halt just before hitting the pins. I couldn't be choking now. This is what I had been training for all summer. If I couldn't do this, I might as well not even be my father's son. After taking a deep breath and praying to the bowling gods, I decided to do the worst bowling sin: cheat. I gave myself one more little push and flailed my arms out, knocking over every single pin in the game. It was amazing, especially when some of the crowd didn't notice or cared that I messed up. I got to have a victory dance, but the judge gave me a thumbs down, and I cried. They said I cheated on account of no arms allowed in bowling, and I really didn't. I really did, but it was still upsetting to get caught. So I picked up one of the other contestants' bowling balls, and I threw it at the judges. I hit him in the face and knocked all of his teeth out. And I went to the sports court. They sent me to sports prison for 33 years. And so now I'm here, and I've been in here for a couple months. Chapter 8, Bonding and Stuff. Wow, Dan the bowling man, I said, sniffing and wiping my eyes with the sleeve of my bright rainbow jumpsuit. What a beautiful story. I wish mine was as good. Well, what happened to you? He asked politely. Oh, nothing. They think I lied about touching the plates when I was running and took bets on which team would win. I said, it was a false accusation. There was no way I would ever do that kind of thing. They just didn't know who they were dealing with. Dan the bowling man patted me on the back. It's okay, Baseball Louie. I believe you would never do that kind of thing. I nodded. Thank you. Just because I had taken money to throw a game or two didn't make me a fraud artist. I had been touching the plate with my fingernails one of the times. I should have been found innocent. A huge man walked in. Manfred, angry. I gulped. Hey Manfred, what are you doing in my friend Dan and the bowling man's cell? He glanced around and realized that it was not, in fact, the cell he had thought it was, and that it was an entirely different wing than the one he lived in. Oh dear, that's embarrassing. Carry on, you two. I'll go back to my own cell, he said, very politely, and suddenly having a British accent. Carry on, you two. I'll go back to my own cell. I looked at Dan the bowling man and asked, what just happened, with my eyeballs. He just shrugged. I frowned back at him. Glancing out the window, which had several bars over it as we were in prison, I noticed that the sun was going down. Oh, Dan the bowling man, whatever shall I do? I asked, as a single tear streamed down my face. He just shook his head. I sniffled again. Not because of the touching story this time, but rather because of the sadness that I didn't have anywhere to sleep on account of that Manfred was taking over the entire room in my wing of the prison. Dan the bowling man came over to the window next to me and patted my head. Not to worry, Baseball Louie, he told me. I shall find the warden or a guard and beg them to let you sleep over tonight. I wiped my eyes and nodded. Thank you, Dan the bowling man. That means a lot to me. Oh, here's the guard now, said the pretty ginger man. He flagged a sports prison guard down, and when she came over, he whispered in her ear, gesturing at me. I hope the two of them weren't making fun of me. I would be sad if they were. But it was really just a hazard of the jail experience. Eventually, the guard nodded, and Dan the bowling man gave me a thumbs up and grinned at me. I smiled gratefully at him. And when he came back, I said, thank you so much, Dan the bowling man. He nodded. Well, I did have to agree to clean the toilets for the next month, but it will be worth it to be with you. Not with you, that is, I chuckled, chuckily. You are a hoot, Dan the bowling man, I replied. I will clean the bathrooms with you. As we were speaking, we were stepping closer and closer together, and when we were almost phasing through each other now, we were so close. I blinked in surprise as I realized this and pulled back a bit. Dan the bowling man turned a lovely shade of beet red and put a hand on his neck sheepishly. So, you didn't want to kiss me then? I hesitated. I didn't know if you wanted to. Yeah, let's kiss. 3, I said. He stepped back towards me and grabbed my waist. We kissed passionately on the lips, and then I pulled away and said, Yippee! Chapter 9, Big Reveal. 3 weeks later, I was chilling in my room in the baseball ring of sports prison. I had my own room now that Manfred had been transferred to a higher security prison. When Dan the bowling man busted open the door to my cell, panting like he'd run all the way from his room in the bowling ring. "Baseball Louie! Baseball Louie! You'll never believe what happened!" I motioned for him to come rest of the way into the room and sit next to me on the bed. We were both hunched over because it was a bunk bed, so it was a bit awkward, but we managed. "What's going on?" I asked him excitedly. "They just announced a sports prison contest, and the winner gets to be let out of prison the next day." He grinned at me excitedly. "The tournament is in 3 days, and the baseball heat, which is yours, goes first." I nodded nervously. "Wow, but there's no other baseball prisoners. Not since Manfred left a week ago. How am I going to play baseball with no partner?" "Never fear, Baseball Louie," Dan the bowling man replied, patting me on the back. "I am ever so selfless, and I shall help you, old chap. I did play a touch of baseball in my youth, after all." I blushed. "Wow, Dan the bowling man, is there anything you can't do?" I asked, fluttering my eyelashes at him. "We have to start training now to get ready, buddy," he replied and stood up, holding his hand out to help me get up as well. I gladly took it, and we left and started our way down the hallway, holding hands and skipping along the way. I wondered where we were going, considered asking Dan the bowling man, but since I didn't want to seem stupid in front of one of the bowlers, luckily, my questions were answered fairly quickly when I opened my eyes and looked in the direction we were going. We were headed to the cafeteria. Soon enough, we got there and went inside. The place was much different than it had been when we ate our lunch. The prison supervisors had put all the tables up out of the way against the walls of the room, only keeping one up. On the table they hadn't taken from us, they had set up a few baseballs and baseball bats, as well as some mitts. I rushed over to the baseball bat section and grabbed a bat. I screeched in fear and anger and threw it on the ground, then politely said, "Oops, wrong bat," I giggled as the winged rodent flew away. Then I grabbed a real wooden bat and grinned at Dan the bowling man. It had been so long since I'd held a real baseball bat, I shed a single tear down my face. "Look, Dan the bowling man, I'm a real baseball boy again," I said, holding it like I would in the game when it happened in 3 days and giving it a couple of practice swings. Dan the bowling man wiped a tear off his own face and grinned at me. "We are going to base the heck out of this ball." Chapter 10, Training for the Game. Dan the bowling man and I had to study up and practice hard if we were going to even have a chance of winning this baseball game. The stakes were high. The winning team got out tomorrow. The losing team got the rest of their lives in prison and possibly the death sentence. Anyone else who was in the tournament but didn't place, or worse, really didn't have any thing of consequence either way. The two of us headed outside of the cafeteria and went into the prison playground yard. We could multitask by doing this, practicing for the tournament as well as checking out the competition. Apparently, there were 2 other teams, which we were surprised about because I was the only baseball player. Looking around, I recognized Madison and Naomi from the basketball wing in one of the other teams. Maybe they were planning on trying every tournament until they won one. The last team had 3 people on it, but I didn't recognize any of them. I couldn't tell whether they were from the tennis wing on account of they had planted a big tennis flag near their training ground, or what. The fact that there were only 3 teams was both good and bad, because there was a 1/3 chance of each winning, losing, or neither. Equal chances. 33% each, or something. I couldn't help but notice that the other teams only had people from one sports wing on them, while Dan the bowling man and my team had 2 different wings. I'd heard it was frowned upon in the sports community to fraternize with other sports, but I had never seen it in action in this way before. It still wasn't a big deal, but it was pretty interesting to see that mostly people stayed within their own sports wings. Dan the bowling man and I got straight to practicing. I stood about 3 feet away from him at first and held the bat. When he managed to throw the ball at me using the mitt he'd managed to snag, that was just large larger enough than his hand to affect his throwing skills. The ball kept falling right in front of his feet. "This practice is the most important of our lives, Baseball Louie," Dan the bowling man cried out. "Dan, I love you, Dan," I said with hard eyes. He soon replied, "We got this!" Next thing I knew, we were hitting all the balls out of the prison yard. Bam! Whap! Ba-pow! We were winning. In practice. I batted further than I'd ever before, especially after Dan the bowling man got a glove that fit properly. Once we were done with our practice, I smiled at Dan the bowling man. "That was really good practice, babe. Baseball Louie," he told me, scratching his neck bashfully. "At this rate, we'll win the tournament in no time." I grinned back at him. Dan the bowling man, you can call me babe if you want. It's certainly shorter than saying Baseball Louie every time. Dan the bowling man patted my head. "You can call me babe too if you want." We shook hands on it and then went back to our cells to rest up for the next day. Baseball Louie Part 2. Putting the ball with the base. Chapter 10? Chapter 11? The Caper. For the past day and a half, my buddy Dan the bowling man and I had basically done nothing but practice for the big baseball game. Every second we weren't eating or sleeping was devoted to bawling. We wore diapers so that we wouldn't have to worry about trivial things such as going to the bathroom. We only had about a day and a half until the tournament, and it was becoming clear to Dan the bowling man that I had perhaps lied about my baseball prowess. I hadn't, of course, if by not lying you mean lying. See, I wasn't really in the baseball leagues so much as I snuck on the field and tried my darndest, which was a grave sin in baseball, on account of I was so bad. That's actually how you get a spot on the baseball team for real, but only if you're actually good or even okay at it. I'd been baseball citizen arrested pretty much right then and there. The person on the bench escorted me out with a baseball-themed handcuffs on. Dan the bowling man was kind enough to pretend not to notice how bad I really was at baseball, and I truly appreciated it. We had been able to, eventually, move to be about 7 feet apart, and I was finally hitting the ball more times than I was missing it. I also practiced pitching a bit, but that involved being able to throw even remotely well, which I was not. We weren't the worst team on the field. The tennis people seemed to think the baseball bat was a tennis racket, and they went through the same sort of confusion every time they went on the field. They took frequent breaks, so it happened pretty often. But we were still not the best either. There were bound to be also other teams that simply hadn't been out on the field doing their practice, which meant that they were already confident in their abilities, and probably not a false confidence like I had. While we were training on the field a lot, there was a dog that kept barking at the fence. The dog kept wanting to eat my baseball. It kind of reminded me of how Kevin always used to eat my baseball back at home. That day, I made sure to hit the baseball out of the yard for him. Dan the bowling man got mad at me on account of that was a terrible hit. But I explained to him that Kevin the dog always ate them, and they were nutritious for dog. And so Dan the bowling man finally understood and gave me a high five. That had been the only baseball we had available to train, though, and without it, we were in trouble. It was also the only ball anyone had to train with, on account of I'd hit all of the other balls out of the park. From glorious home runs, of course. Everyone took turns training with it, on account of I was nice enough to share, and I was the reason that we only had one left in the first place. Now, though, we didn't even have any balls. Chapter 12. Trouble. As soon as we realized I was the only ball, we ran for the hills. And by hills, I mean hiding in the bathroom. Dan the bowling man, what should we do? We lost the only ball in all of sports prison, I asked nervously. I think the prison guards have some more in their secret office, Dan the bowling man said. We just have to find it and break in. Bang, bang, bang on the door. It was Dan the bowling man's roommate, Say Mike. You may remember that last time Dan the bowling man was the only member of the bowling wing, but all that had changed about a week ago. St. Mike was the disgraced former king of bowling who had just been found guilty of lying on the bowling census about the amount of people who were still playing his sport and had been sent here to be in sports prison with us as punishment. It seemed that St. Mike was really, really angry, and we had no clue why, but one thing was for certain. He definitely was going to beat our bums now. "Occupied!" Dandy on the bowling man yelled. No use. St. Mike burst open the door in mere seconds. "Why did you feed our ball to a dog?" St. Mike shouted angrily at us. We were hunkered down in the corner. Because dogs like to eat baseballs and it's healthy for them?" I squeaked. "That wasn't a baseball. It was our community ball. Get it back," St. Mike explained. "We will. We have the perfect plan. Just trust us," Dan the bowling man said calmly. "Better be back by Tuesday sundown," St. Mike warned us, then walked away with loud footsteps. It was Monday evening, so we had one single day. The tournament was in 1.5 days. That gave us 12 hours after we got the ball back, if we did, to practice. Dan the bowling man turned to me. I'm scared to go to my room tonight. Could I bunk with you?" "Yeah, of course. That way we can get planning, too. We need a foolproof plan, because we are fools." We headed to my room, where we would not be disturbed since Manfred was gone. Chapter 13. The Plan. After a bit of brainstorming, Dan the bowling man and I came up with a plan to get the ball back. We would simply hop the fence, chase the dog down, bring her back, and wait for her to poop the ball out, then give it back to St. Mike. We decided not to wash it first on account of we hated him. We went out to the courtyard to set the plan in motion. Dan the bowling man and I walked right up to the fence. It was 12 feet tall, but nothing a little climbing couldn't fix. Plus, I was pretty tall, if I do say so myself, so it shouldn't have been too difficult for me. It shouldn't have been difficult, but it was. When we got up to the fence, I made the mistake of looking up. Immediately, I gulped in fear and then turned to Dan the bowling man. I don't know if I can do this, Baseball Louie. It seems too scary." "It's easy, Baseball Louie," he replied, flashing a grin at me. "Watch me and follow my lead." I nodded, sweating buckets, and stepped back to watch Dan the bowling man climb over the fence. He went backwards a few steps to get a running start, then ran for it. The second Dan the bowling man's feet came off the ground, though, a bolt of lightning came out of nowhere and struck him down. He twitched a lot and then fell asleep on the floor. I rushed over to him. Dan the bowling man, "That's not your bed," I giggled. Dan the bowling man? He wasn't responding. I poked at him with my long, spindly finger. Dan the bowling man? Art thou alive?" Suddenly, he twitched a bit. "Phew," I said in relief, just as the sports prison guard came running up out of nowhere, holding a weird basketball-themed vape-shaped item. "Sorry, buddy," the guard said. "I had to tase your friend. He was trying to escape. Standard procedure." I gasped. "He's not my friend. Dan the bowling man is... Well, he's... What was he? We kissed a few days prior, but there was no conversation about what we were." I wondered what I should tell the guard. When I looked out of the good part of my mostly blind, all-white left eye, I saw that both the guard and Dan the bowling man were gone. They were replaced by another guard that I hadn't known existed before. "Don't you go getting any ideas," said the new guard. I gulped. "Yes, sir," I said, saluting as if we were in the sports military instead of sports prison. "But I need the ball. It's the only one we have." The guard looked around for witnesses before speaking again. "You didn't hear this from me, but the extra balls are kept in the guard's office." I blinked in surprise that he would volunteer this information and readied myself to ask a question. But when I opened my eyes again, he was gone. Chapter 14. After the plan went off. When I found out we could get another ball, I was ecstatic. I turned to tell Dan the bowling man, but quickly remembered he had been taken away. This would mean I would have to visit the evil corner. The evil corner was rumored to be right next to the cafeteria. It was a sort of closet-shaped room that they put naughty prisoners in. I heard that it was also where they put every rat, ant, or other gross creature they found in the kitchen. Dandy and the Bowling Man wouldn't last long in the evil corner. He hated ants. Something about meeting a human-sized scary ant as a child. But that wasn't important to think about right now. I had to get him out of there before the ants, rats, etc. ate him. I rushed back into the prison and was immediately reminded of what a maze it was. I felt the same as I did any time I walked into my local floor mart. Impossible to locate anything in, even though I had grown up in there. Okay, I didn't grow up in there, up in the prison, but still, I had been there for weeks and still couldn't really find my way around. I sort of knew the general area I was looking for, but I couldn't get there from the backyard easily. I searched for the evil corner for quite a bit before giving up. What's the use? I said aloud to myself. I'll never find the evil corner. Somebody near me started coughing. It sounded like they were clearing their throat, but after a while it escalated to sounding like they were coughing up a lung. I glanced up. Do you mind? I asked, sighing. The person looked at me. I recognized it as Drew from the lacrosse ring. He was in for general shenanigans and playing a fake sport, which he denied wholeheartedly, citing that he was just some guy at the field at the wrong time, and that I don't need to be in here when there's a real lacrosse guys out there stinking up the universe. Drew waved. Baseball Louie, I couldn't help but notice that you were talking about looking for the evil corner, he said. His voice was still a little hoarse from clearing his throat so darn much, but it got better as he kept talking. So that's the thing is, it's right there. You're sitting against the door. He gestured at the door I was leaning against. I hadn't even realized that there was a door at all. Thanks, buddy. I springed up and wiped my tears. I shook his hand. You're a good friend, Drew, even if lacrosse isn't real. For the last time, I'm not a lacrosser, Drew exclaimed hoarsely and screechly, then walked away calmly. After Drew was out of sight, I took a deep breath and stood up, facing the door. Dandy and the Bowling Man? I called. I didn't want to barge in on someone in solitary and get them out if it wasn't him. That would just be plain awkward. A voice came through the door. Baseball Louie, is that you? I'm in the evil corner. It was Dandy and the Bowling Man. I jumped for joy and went to open the door, but the second my hand touched the handle, it shocked me and I fell to the floor writhing around. Ow! Ouchie! Ow! I said after I stopped wiggling. Dandy and the Bowling Man, can you hear me? I'm on the floor, I squeaked, pulling myself up so that I was sitting and leaning against the door. I can still hear you, Dandy and the Bowling Man replied from inside the evil corner. I'm nodding my head right now, but you can't see me. Phew, I said, smiling. Could you try the door, babe? I was still getting a bit used to calling him babe, but it felt good to say out loud. I tried to do it as much as possible, on account of I might forget who I was talking to if I didn't. Yeah, sure, Dandy and the Bowling Man's voice from the other side of the door. There was some shuffling, then a thump. He'd clearly thrown himself against the door in dismay. Didn't work. At least on this side of the door, the knob doesn't electrocute me, he said in a shruggy sort of way. I groaned. How would we ever win the tournament now? We didn't even have a real team at the moment on account of Dandy and the Bowling Man being in the evil corner. It would have to be me in a trench coat pretending to be another guy, and I wouldn't be able to change outfits that fast. And he was my boyfriend, or whatever. Sighing, I stood up, veering to the left on account of my eyesight being so poor. The door to the evil corner quickly opened, and out came Dandy and the Bowling Man. He fell backwards, since he had been leaning against the door, but that was besides the point. Dandy and the Bowling Man, I squealed, grinning down at him. What are you doing down there, silly? He shrugged and held out his hand for me to help him up, but apparently taking his hand and holding it was not what he had wanted. Eventually, he gave up on trying to get me to do what he wanted to do and just stood up, bracing himself on the doorframe. Baseball Louie, it was so scary in there. It was dark and there were rats and ants, etc., with huge, evil, glowing eyes and big, scary, mad eyebrows. I'm so glad you got me out of there, Dan Dan the bowling man said, hugging me. I sniffled, hugging him back. Thank you, Dan Dan the bowling man. Then I remembered that the reason I had come to break him out, and it wasn't just that I missed him in the first 3 minutes he'd been in solitary. OMG, Dan Dan the bowling man. The other guard who didn't tase you said that there's Take your time, Baseball Louie, he said, patting me lovingly. Oh, he said that there was spare balls in the guard's office, 3, I said, and high-fived Dan Dan the bowling man. So all that we have to do is get in there and take one. That's awesome. So what's our plan? Dan Dan the bowling man asked, foolishly trusting me. I hadn't actually made a plan yet, and was in fact flying by the seat of my pants. But he didn't need to know that. All we need to do is break in. How hard could it be? Chapter 15. The Break-In. Since I didn't know my way around the prison, even though I had been there for about a month, and Dan Dan the bowling man did, I had him lead me to where we needed to go. Apparently, the guard's room was right near the warden's office, which existed. I had completely forgotten about the warden. What if he came out of his office when we were about to break into the guard's place and saw us? He'd extend our sentences to 20 times the length they were at the moment, and disinvite us from the baseball tournament. This was purely speculation on my part, but I believed it wholeheartedly. Okay, Dan Dan the bowling man, I said, trying to think on my feet. We need to create a distraction. One of us should do that while the other tries to get in the guard room. Dan Dan the bowling man nodded. I can try my best to distract the warden and the guards. We high-fived, and I watched Dan Dan the bowling man approach the warden's office. Excuse me, sir, he said, politely, leaning against the doorframe like a silly guy. There's something wrong in the bowling wing. I can show you if you just follow me. As soon as I figured they were far enough away that I could start attempting to break into the guard's office, I started attempting to break into the guard's office. First, I tried the door by jiggling the handle, but I found out that it was locked. After trying the handle 3 more times, I decided to investigate what could be locking it. There was a place for a key to go in, and the knob to unlock it. But there was also a number pad where I could simply input correct stream of numbers and allow access to the room. But I didn't have the key or the correct stream of numbers, though, and those were the second and third issues I ran into. I figured the best thing I could do was look for a key or look for numbers around the prison. Easy enough, except for that I couldn't see very well and couldn't tell where I was either. I sat down next to the door, waiting for Dan Dan the bowling man to get back so he could take me back to my room. While I was sitting there, I watched for numbers anywhere around me in front of the door. In front of me was another door. It was labeled with the word office and had a number 12 below it. I wondered, could the password be 1212? It made sense that it was because it was the only number in sight. I leapt to my feet and tried it. It did not work. I tried it again for good measure. And again. And again. Nothing. Except a blaring alarm that went off after the fourth time. Yikes! I slept back down next to the door. The alarm was still blaring. But just then, the door opened. I was positioned so that as the door opened, I was able to slip right in underneath their feet, rolling like a ball. I felt like Dan Dan the bowling man probably did when he was a ball. Once I was in the room, I stood up and looked around, making sure the door clicked shut behind me. I couldn't see anything, so I felt around for a light switch, only to discover that the light was already on. I had forgotten that I couldn't see for shit. Gosh darn it, I said, taking off my imaginary hat and throwing it on the ground, then stomping on it. How the hell was I meant to get the ball now? I angrily opened the door back up, turned off the light, and strolled right out of that godforsaken room. As soon as the door closed behind me, I heard the familiar sound of Dan Dan the bowling man's cleats coming up behind me. Did you get the ball, Baseball Louie? He asked excitedly. I gulped nervously. I hadn't been able to get the ball on account of I couldn't see for shit. But Could I really tell that to my beloved Dan Dan the Bully Man? Yeah. I couldn't see inside the room, even though I got in. So I left, and then you showed up, and you asked me if I did it, and I said, and now we are standing right here. Chapter 16. Break in, take 2. Slime tutorial. We headed back to my cell and to plot and scheme for our next attempt to break in, and actually get the ball this time, on account of I really hadn't before. I sat on my bed and gestured for Dan Dan the Bully Man to sit next to me. He gladly did so. We usually hung out in the bowling wing in Dan Dan the Bowling Man's room, but St. had shown up a couple of days ago, and we had to move to mine. St. had really been ruining the romantic atmosphere. Now, Dan Dan the Bowling Man and I were sitting together on my bed as the only 2 people in the entirety of the baseball wing, and it was nice. It was a nice, roomy wing. This is nice and roomy, I remarked to Dan Dan the Bowling Man, who nodded in agreement. It's perfect for plotting and scheming, Dan Dan the Bowling Man told me in reply to my notion about it, the room, being nice and roomy. And I tucked a strand of bright purple hair behind my left ear. It's good for kissing. Baseball Louie, you freaky boy, he said in cursive, leaning in to kiss me right on the lips, both my top and bottom lip, at the same time, in case you don't remember how kissing works. It was, you could say, pretty delicious. I pulled away and giggled relentlessly. We have to focus, Dan Dan the Bowling Man, I exclaimed, patting him on the back. How are we going to get the balls now? We don't want to get beaten to a pulp. Dan Dan the Bowling Man nodded seriously. I've been brainstorming on that one, he told me, and I have no gosh darn clue, to be honest. I sighed and fell back onto the bed like I was a bag of rocks, grunting as I hit the bed on account of it knocking the wind out of me. The mattress at Sports Prison weren't particularly comfortable. Dan Dan the Bowling Man watched me go down and then sort of awkwardly patted me on the forehead. I'm sure we'll figure something out, Baseball Louie. We always do, he remarked. That was true. We always did figure something out, often much to the dismay of the prison guard and also the other prisoners, and honestly, probably the sports mice that lived in the walls. The sports mice, which nobody had spoken to would either confirm. Fuck. So funny. The sports mice, which nobody I'd spoken to would either confirm or deny the existence of, were weird creatures that lived in the walls, unlike rats and ants, which were very much real and lived only in the evil corner. The most I'd ever noticed of the mall mice was a bit of scampering in the walls at nighttime. It sometimes turned out to be Dan Dan the Bowling Man getting cheese out of his secret stash, though, and by sometimes, I mean every time so far. Every day, Dan Dan the Bowling Man took at least one extra piece of cheese and put it in a little hole in the wall to get it at a later date using his long, spindly fingers. He was really good at getting it into nooks and crannies. That's it! I cried, opening my eyes and sitting up to look at Dan Dan the Bowling Man. He looked at me all confused. What is? Follow me, buddy! I grabbed his hand and took off, forgetting I couldn't see for shit and running straight into the wall. Ouch! Dan Dan the Bowling Man sighed. I'll lead you there. Where are we going? To the guard's office, I exclaimed, grabbing his hand again after dusting myself off on account of I had wall dust on me. I hope there wasn't any sports mice droppings in there. Dan Dan the Bowling Man helped me navigate back to the room the balls were in, and I hardly even ran into anything this time. Once we got there, I tried to handle one more time just in case it was unlocked. It was, however, not, in fact, unlocked. So I stepped back and tried to remember my master plan. Oh yeah, I explained aloud and audibly. Dan Dan the Bowling Man, I need you to lean on down and look under the door to the balls room. He nodded and complied, laying almost completely flat on the floor and looking to the side to see underneath the door. There was only about a 1-inch gap underneath, so it had to be hard to see. I wouldn't know, because I can't see for shit anyways. Can you see what's going on in there? I asked him, rushing him just a teeny bit. Dan Dan the Bowling Man replied, yes, but it's pretty dark in there. I mostly can only see the gross green carpet. I nodded sympathetically. Well, I do have a plan for this. Is there any way you can get your long, spindly finger under there and open it somehow? I asked him, having completely run out of sympathy for the day. I can sure as heck try, Baseball Louie, explained Dan the bowling man, grinning at me. He reached his hand under the door and grabbing it, trying to pull it towards us. The darn thing wouldn't budge. I sighed in defeat and lay down on the carpet. Not as fun as a little worm, but as a lad who had given up. I stared at the prison ceiling and wished that I had never even discovered baseball. At least that way, I'd be spared from all of this gosh darned heartbreak. After a few moments, I heard Dan the bowling man say, "I think I got it!" and then clicking of the door. I stopped suffering and stood up. "You did it, Dan the bowling man," I explained, standing up and pushing the door. "Let's get that ball." We rushed into the room and searched for the ball. Well, Dan the bowling man did. I just stood there, trying to make out anything in the room that I could see from the one small patch of vision I had in my left eye. "I got it," Dan the bowling man exclaimed. "Let's go." The two of us hurried out of the guard's room and tried to slam the door behind us, but I felt a tap on my shoulder before I could. I gulped and turned around. It was one of the guards, the one who had tased Dan the bowling man. Well, 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 he said. "What do we have here?" We just needed a ball, sir," I said. "By the way, this is Dan the bowling man, and I'm his accomplice, Baseball Louie." The guard raised an eyebrow at me, then sighed. "You could have just asked, and I would have grabbed one for you." "Then why did you make it sound like a secret?" I cried out, groaning. He shrugged, then sent us on our way. Chapter 17. Practicing. Dan the bowling man and I went out into the yard with our new ball to practice for the big game. It would be the next morning, and it was already almost dusk, so we had to get really good at it really fast. Luckily, we were dealing with a baseball prodigy, me, here, so we weren't going to have to work all that hard. At the first pitch, I didn't hit it on account of I couldn't see the ball. It was okay, though, because we were just warming up. The second pitch, I got much closer, but still didn't hit it. I groaned in frustration after pitch 14. I'm never going to get good at this. We'll come in last place and they'll euthanize us. Dan the bowling man patted my back. Not to worry, Baseball Louie. They won't euthanize us if we lose. They'll just burn us at the stake. That does make me feel better. Thanks, Dan the bowling man, I said and gestured for him to toss the ball again. I was going to win this baseball game. I had to see the outside world again and play real baseball, go to the milk store, see some of my family members, the ones I liked at least. We kept right on practicing for the rest of the afternoon. I really felt like I was about to hit a couple dozen more pitches. I could tell Dan the bowling man was worried that we wouldn't be good enough, though. His throws were getting more and more nervous. I wish that I could tell him it would be okay, but honestly, I didn't know that for certain myself. It was dusk when the pitches suddenly stopped. "What happened, Dan the bowling man?" I asked. Why did you stop?" "I thought I saw something outside of the gate," he called over to me, and I walked over to try and catch a glimpse of what he was trying to see. Suddenly, I heard a very familiar bark, and another, and another, and another. The barking finally stopped after a while, and a voice said, "Finally, Louie, I've been waiting for you." I gulped. Was my sister mad at me? Her voice sounded like an entire eye roll. Chapter 18. Reunion. "Are you mad at me?" I asked. Why was she even at sports prison if she wasn't in sports prison? She didn't even play sports. She wasn't even any good at baseball either. "Louie, you were supposed to have Kevin with you the whole time, as your seeing eye dog, remember?" "Oh, yeah," I said. "Wait, so I was supposed to have Kevin the whole time, and no one even told me? What the heck?" "Yeah, Louie, I've been trying to get your dog to you for weeks. Why wouldn't you look over at the fence ever?" Maybe because I can't see?" I rolled my eyes. My sister was so rude sometimes. Couldn't she tell that I was blind and needed my seeing eye dog? Oh, wait, that was me who couldn't tell. I giggled at my own thoughts for far too long. Okay, but Actually, I was in the yard at one point, Baseball Louie continued. You pressed a letter to Kevin against my arm, and then it just fell. That was a bit awkward, but at least I knew Kevin had received the letter I'd written to him. Can you toss Kevin over the fence, Baseball Louie? I asked. Oh. Wait. Let me rewind. Or maybe because I can't see, I rolled my eyes. My sister was so rude sometimes. Couldn't she tell that I was blind and needed my seeing eye dog? Oh wait, that was me who couldn't tell. I giggled at my own thoughts for far too long. Okay, but I was actually in the yard at one point, Baseball Louie said. You pressed a letter to Kevin against my arm, and then it just let it fall. That was a bit awkward, but at least I knew Kevin had received the letter I'd written to him. Can you toss Kevin over the fence, Baseball Louie? :3, I asked. It should be easy, since he was a tiny Chihuahua Dalmatian guy. No, she said, and probably shook her head. Kevin's way too big. Baseball Louie, I don't want to interrupt, squeaked Dandy and the Bowling Man, but that's a big-ass golden retriever. I gulped. Kevin had been a giant dog this whole time? That was embarrassing. It made sense, though, that he would be here, though. He was the only dog I'd ever met that ate baseballs. Baseball Louie and Dandy and the Bowling Man asked Dandy and the Bowling Man to get one of the guards to let her in so she could get Kevin to me, and he left. I felt so sad without Dandy and the Bowling Man here. How could he just leave me like that? I knew it was just to get Kevin, but it felt like he was gone for an eternity. Dandy and the Bowling Man, I cried out, knees to the ground. I missed him, and I yearned for him. Kevin, come back! Dandy and the Bowling Man's voice pierced through the air. Kevin bounded into my arms. Wow, Kevin really was a golden retriever. I had no idea all this time, but that made sense. Dandy and the Bowling Man, Kevin's really here. This is wonderful. We're going to win baseball now for sure. Dandy and the Bowling Man grinned at me. I hope your dog can hit baseballs better than you can. My sister appeared next to us suddenly. Maybe she was there the whole time. Anyways, you guys know Kevin is really good at baseball, right? She asked, annoyed. I shrugged. That makes sense, seeing as he is my dog after all, I said. By the way, Louie, Kevin told me she's a girl, so I wrote it down and put that she uses she, her pronouns. So, a girl named Kevin? I remarked. That's a strange name for a girl. Baseball Louie sighed. Goodbye, Louie. Nice to meet you, Dan. I glared in the direction of her voice. Why wouldn't she use mine or Dan and the Bowling Man's proper titles? I didn't let it bother me for too long, though, because we had to get right back to playing baseball. Chapter 19. More practice. It was time to prove that we could really do this, and by that, I mean it was time to do more practicing before the main event. I was hoping that we could actually hit the balls, and he was about to throw the ball, though. Dandy and the Bowling Man screeched to a halt. Hang on, Baseball Louie, he said. We have to make sure that it's okay for your girl dog named Kevin to play. Let's find the rule book for baseball. I nodded, so Dandy and the Bowling Man and I took the girl dog named Kevin to my room, where I always kept a copy for the baseball rule book, reading a chapter out loud to myself every night as a bedtime story. When we got there, I grabbed the book and politely handed it to Dandy and the Bowling Man, who took it and started thumbing through, using his superhuman Control F skills to find the word dog. After a few minutes, he closed the book and grinned at me. I don't see anything in here that would make it so a dog can't compete, he told me. I grinned real big and high-fived Kevin and also Dandy and the Bowling Man. Neither of them were particularly good at actually hitting my hand with their hand/paw, but it was a noble effort. Let's go get ready for the tournament, I shouted and ran to the door, overshooting where it was and running into the wall directly to the left of it. Dandy and the Bowling Man grabbed me and steered me in the right direction, giving me Kevin's leash so she could guide me, as it was her job. Once we got onto the field, there was no time to lose. We let Kevin go to the baseball and
go to the field and baseball her heart out. She had a good time, and the best part was that she was also amazing at the game. Dan Dan, the bowling man, told me so. The practice continued for the rest of the day until we had to go to sleep to get ready for the next morning. The guards was letting Dan Dan the bowling man sleep over, colon 3, on account of Say Mike was still in the bowling wing, being very scary. One of the guards was kind enough to give Kevin a dog bed, and once she had clocked out for the day, she laid on it very happily. I guess it was comfortable for her because she was honk-shoeing very a lot. Chapter 21, The Tournament. Today was the big day, the biggest day of all, the day of the tournament. The tournament was today. I was so excited, but also very nervous. I guess, you could say I was nervous-sided. My eyes shot open, and I shot out of bed. Dan Dan the bowling man was fast asleep. Dan Dan the bowling man, wake up, wake up! I yelled. Today is the big day, the biggest day of all, the day of the tournament. The tournament is today! Let me sleep, Dan Dan the bowling man moaned, pulling the blankets back over his head. I sighed. Fine, I guess I'll do it myself. Come on, Kevin, I said, tapping the dog with my foot. She sat up dutifully and let me put her leash on her. We were about to go tournamenting. Dan Dan the bowling man caught up with us a bit down the hallway and walked in slow motion with us for the rest of the way out to the yard. We looked out there and discovered that there was a complimentary breakfast for the baseball players. It was located in the middle of the baseball field. We said, yes, please, and went and got some pancakes, etc. Kevin really liked the fruity cereal that they had. I liked drinking the maple syrup right out of the bottle. Yum! Dan Dan the bowling man liked oatmeal, but he didn't like just any oatmeal. Oh no, he had to eat it in a very particular way. First, he got his oatmeal warmed up, just by microwaving the oats, mind you. No water or nothing. After that, he peeled 2 bananas and gave the bananas to Kevin. The peel went straight into his oatmeal, whole. Then he pulled some sausages out of the heater and let them sit. While they were cooling down, he poured some apple juice on his oatmeal. Soggy. Next, he reached for blueberries. At this point, everyone else was steering clear of the breakfast bar. He started chewing up the blueberries and spitting them into his oatmeal. I used to do this every day at the Hamilton Hotel, where I lived before prison, he told me, spitting blueberry remains on my face. I watched closely as Dan Dan the bowling man took the cooled sausage and cut it into star-shaped chunks of unused sausage flying everywhere. He added that to his oatmeal as well. By this time, no one was even near the continental breakfast. In fact, we were the only ones on the whole field. Baseball Louie was making quite the mess. Dan Dan the bowling man was making quite the mess. I assumed they'd start wrapping up breakfast by now, because the tournament was in a few minutes, but the cleaning crew looked scared to approach us. I couldn't understand why. Could you pass me some waffle batter? Dan Dan the bowling man exclaimed. It's the last thing I need for my oatmeal. I got a bowl and filled it to the brim with waffle batter. I hope this is enough, colon 3, I exclaimed, sloshing some of it over as I was bringing the batter to Dan Dan the bowling man for his oatmeal. It's perfect. Thank you, Baseball Louie. He took the bowl and poured it into his bowl of oatmeal. It overflowed. A lot. The field was sure a mess after this one. Nearly all of the grass was covered. Gulp, I hope this wouldn't interfere with our tournament or make it start late. Kevin had a very busy schedule! Exclamation point. Now, time to put it in the blast freezer for 10 to 15 minutes maximum, or it will explode, he told me, then kissed me passionately on the lips. We waited until it was time to take it out after 30 seconds and then stopped our drooling and locked lips make-out sesh, and Dan Dan the bowling man got his bowl out of the freezer, not even phased as he got burns from the cold-ass freezer. Just as Dan Dan the bowling man was about to take his first bite, we heard the bugles sound, the bugles that said the tournament was beginning. I bit all 10 of my fingernails at once. Dan Dan the bowling man, we're gonna be late, I said. Then halfway through I remembered that we were already on the field and giggled softly. Oh yeah, carry on. He nodded and ate some oatmeal, bowl and all, crunching very loudly as it was all frozen solid and impossible to eat. A mysterious man started walking towards us. "Are you ready to play some baseball?" he said through a megaphone right in our faces. Then he put it down and said, "Oh, sorry, I thought there were more of you and you were further away." I shrugged. "No problem. Common mistake." He sighed and looked around. "Nobody on the field, huh?" We nodded sadly. "Just us," I said. "The pretty princesses." That was our group name, you see. It was a pretty good one, you could say. The man pulled up a chair and sat down, grabbing a glass of orange juice and downing it in 4 seconds flat. Then he grabbed himself a plate and got some nice warm sausages. After about 12 minutes, he cleared his throat and stood up. "Okay, so if this other team doesn't show up within 15 minutes, you're allowed to leave. You guys win by default," he said. He was the referee, and we won the game! I looked at Dan Dan the bowling man, who was finishing up his oatmeal. "We did it, Dan Dan the bowling man! We're free!" Chapter 22. Aftermath. After the tournament, I was ecstatic. We were finally going to get out of here. I sat and ate some blueberries, then fed Kevin some scrambled eggs from my plate with a lot of gumption. We found out that we had to meet with the warden later in the day, so we had a few hours to get our stuff packed and say goodbye to our rooms and the rest of the prisoners, at least the ones we liked. I put my toothbrush in the duffel bag as the final flourish, then shook Kevin's hand. "Well, buddy," I said, "we did it. We survived prison." Even though Kevin had only been with me for less than a day, I knew I couldn't have done it without her. "Let's go find Dan Dan the bowling man." I wandered into the direction I thought the bowling wing would probably be until Kevin saw a map and showed me the way. When we got to Dan Dan the bowling man's room, Sam Mike was there, talking to him. He was saying, "Thanks for letting me have the room when I moved in. I don't like sleeping in front of people." "Yeah, of course," replied Dan Dan the bowling man as he lifted his backpack onto one shoulder. He spotted me in the doorway and speed-walked over to me. "Let's go to our last lunch." We went to the cafeteria and got our trays, piling them high with all the food available. I snuck an extra piece of cheese for Dan Dan the bowling man because I knew he liked to have cheese for the hole in our room. Oh, wait, we wouldn't be there anymore. "Dan Dan the bowling man, you have to promise we'll keep in touch and stay together after we get out of here," I exclaimed as soon as we had finished eating our lunch. I also handed him the piece of cheese I'd gotten for him. He patted my shoulder comfortingly, stuffing the cheese into his mouth. "Don't worry, Baseball Louie. I wouldn't dream of separating us. You and Kevin can move into my condominium I own, but I stay at a hotel for the free breakfast," he said. "I can't wait for you to meet my daughter, Amanda." The end.